Good morrow, ladies and gents. This is Andrew with Creative Crash. How you guys doing? So today we're going to go over a few things that I think make a bad movie. For today's Creative Crash, we're going over the principles of making a bad movie. Now you may be wondering, why would we want to make a bad movie? Shouldn't the focus be on making a good movie? Well, the trick is, if you know what steps to avoid, you can make a better film. This works in any principle that you're using for storytelling. If you know what not to do, you're on your way to making a much better story. I feel a lot of people today focus a lot on the negatives of a story, and because of that, it robs them a lot of their opportunities to experience the pleasantries that are actually out there. Like, there are a lot of good movies that are being made, a lot of good television shows, a lot of good games.
There's some good in this world, Mr. Furl, and it's worth fighting for.
And people are just kind of brushing over them or saying that they're not as good as they could have been. You know, this idea of perfection. And that's something that we're going to hit on a little bit today. But the important thing of this is talking about the pieces that we want to avoid, the absolute do not haves, because those things just ultimately make for a bad story. To get more insight from the common person about this, I asked a lot of people on the street what to them made a bad film. I got a lot of similar responses from that. Poor acting.
You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
A lack of a moral to the story.
I used to know a girl. She had a dozen guys. One of them found out about it, beat her up so bad she ended up in a hospital on Guerrero Street.
What a story, Mark.
Bad dialogue or poorly written dialogue.
Yeah, can I have a dozen red roses, please?
Oh, hi, Johnny. I didn't know it was you. Here you go.
That's me. How much is it?
It'll be $18.
Here you go. Keep the change. Hi, doggy.
You're my favorite customer.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye-bye.
There are no defined boundaries to the world.
I cannot tell you. It's confidential.
Oh, come on, why not?
No, I can't. Anyway, how is your sex life?
No personal connection between the audience and the characters. Plot holes, being downright boring, poor pacing to the film, lack of motivation, or poor quality.
I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
Each of these pieces relate to a singular idea, something that I've thought of for a long time in film, and my personal litmus test, if you will, of what makes a bad film. That is the suspension of disbelief. The term goes back to the 19th century. Essentially what it means is that the viewer or the reader is willing to suspend their understanding that this is just a story for the duration of the piece. So they're willing to go into it and say, okay, I understand that this is a story, but I'm going to take it for what it is, and I'm going to be absorbed into it. Now, all these elements that I mentioned are things that prevent you from becoming enveloped in the story. If the characters are really poorly done, you have a very difficult time actually suspending that disbelief. You'll end up leaving the theater feeling like the film was empty somehow, and ultimately you'll just say, oh, it was a crappy film. Now, something that's occurring a lot lately is people are going into films already with the idea that they're not going to suspend their disbelief. They're like, oh, I'm going into this with, you know what, no matter what, I know this is a movie, and oh, I'm going to see the zipper, or whatever it is on the monster. I'm going to see something that's going to take me out of it. And yes, a costume issue is something that it would affect your ability to suspend the disbelief, because now you see, oh, it is just a costume, it's not actually a monster, there's no reason for me to be afraid. That is an actual problem. But ultimately, if you're not willing to go into it with an open mind to begin with, you're not going to get a lot out of the film anyway. Inherently, films, books, and other forms of storytelling are going to be fake. It's part of them. Unless you're reading something autobiographical or biographical or historical, you're going to have those elements where there are unreal things to it. Now, the reason this exists is because stories are designed to teach us things. They're meant to help us find answers to questions that we normally wouldn't look at. They're very helpful in teaching children, but they can also be very useful in teaching adults. That's why we go and watch films. Yes, to be entertained, but the entertainment comes from stimulating our minds. And if we go in with a closed mind, with no desire to suspend our disbelief, in the end, we won't get a lot out of it, even if it was a very good film. Films that did this well, suspending our disbelief. Alien, oh my goodness. Alien did an excellent job of that, because of its very simple elements. The film Alien focused on a small number of crew members, 7 people. Each of them had a unique narrative to their character. The dialogue was very believable. The situation was very persistent. The environment that they were in was the same place. You got familiar with it. You understood what you were looking at. When the environment changed, it was even more terrifying because you were there with them. You had already experienced the reality of it. The scenes were very real, very painted, very real. The experiences of the actors in the film were very real. And the creature didn't have the visible zipper. You saw very little of the creature. And because of that, it made it even more terrifying because your mind would fill in the gaps because of suspension of disbelief. Because the film relied on that principle so well, it ended up being an excellent film that to this day, the film is still applauded by fans and critics alike. The Green Mile. Again, The Green Mile had believable characters, believable situations. There were things that were familiar to us, things that we've read about, or that we've experienced. However, the story was still very layered, and did have very fantastical elements. The situation with John Coffey was something that is unreal to the natural world as we understand it. It's something that, objectively, you would say, well, that isn't something that could truly happen. But because it played the elements so well, in the end, we're able to leave the film feeling something new inside of us, a sense of awe or wonder about the world around us. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, another film and play that did very well in the principle of suspending the disbelief of the audience. The situations are very harrowing. You became connected to the characters because of their experiences. The tragedies that occurred in the story were very believable. There were situations that we could understand, that we could feel the characters' pain on. Because of those situations, we leave the theater with a sense of understanding about the world, about ourselves, and about the characters within it. We can live vicariously through the experiences of these people, knowing that they went through these hardships and we don't have to because we've learned from their example. It also helps us get out of our head a little bit. We get trapped in our mind a lot in our modern day and age. We feel that we're not allowed to be imaginative, or that there's some rule that we're not allowed to play until our chores are all done. Who makes the rules on that? When a man becomes an adult, he can choose for himself what he's going to do. If you want to imagine, please feel free to, and you might be surprised some of the things you can come up with. That's the point of stories altogether. Stories help us to imagine more. They help us to get more ideas about the world around us. Human beings have that very unique ability. We can think about things that other people have experienced and learn from them. Because of that, we're able to grow as beings, and it helps us to grow all together as one. Examples of movies that didn't do this very well: Batman and Robin.
The Iceman cometh.
The situation in Batman and Robin was the characters weren't very believable. The dialogue was really cheesy, and sometimes that can work if you're trying to be cheesy. With this, it felt like it was trying to be serious, and because of that, it couldn't be taken seriously. There are ways around this. If you want to write cheesy dialogue, pitch it cheesy. Take, for instance, Hot Rod. Hot Rod is a very cheesy movie, but overall it's a pleasant, funny experience because it takes it the extra mile. It knows it's cheesy, so it pushes it over that limit a little more. It plays into its strengths or its weaknesses. Either way, it's a good example there. Another movie that didn't do this very well is Fantastic Four, the 2015 version. And again, it comes down to this feeling of not being able to connect to the characters. The experiences may be exciting, there may be great explosions and lots of great effects, but if you can't draw in the viewer with the experiences of the character, then you're not going to keep their attention for very long. People go to films and people watch and read stories because they want to experience new ideas that they can apply to themselves, something that they can think about later on and either feel, oh wow, that was enjoyable, for whatever reason it was. And because of those experiences, that is what constitutes in the mind a good film. And if those pieces are lacking, a bad film. To become good at telling these story elements, it requires a lot of practice or a lot of patience. Take, for instance, the words of Stephen King. He said that in order to be a good writer, you need to read a lot and write a lot. That means that some of the things you're going to be working on in the beginning aren't necessarily going to be good, but they'll be done. And the more you get done, the better you'll get at it. As you activate your imagination, and as you delve into the ideas that you have inside of you, you'll find better ones, and you'll get better at doing it. And that's the goal in telling a story. If you can get better at it over time, eventually you'll create those stories that inspire people and keep their attention for years to come. No one goes into a film thinking that they've got the perfect story idea. Even Dan O'Bannon, whenever he was writing Alien, didn't feel that it was the perfect story. It wasn't until later that it started to come together and develop that people started to feel this was going to be something really great. Even on the day of its release, Dan O'Bannon felt that it was going to be a flop because a lot of the ideas that he had been pioneering on it had been either removed or pinched back on himself. But in the end, the film was exactly what it was meant to be, and he was very pleased with it. That's something that we can all think about for ourselves. As we're trying to move forward in our own storytelling, find ways that you can activate your imagination. Find ways that you, too, can suspend the disbelief of your audience. And if you're able to do that, you've got yourself a good story, regardless of what medium you're working in. Thanks for listening today, guys. Again, this has been Creative Crush, and I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have questions or comments, please put those below. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll get creative again with you next time.